For over 300 years, the Romanov dynasty ruled Russia, shaping its history and influencing the world. But behind the grandeur of their reign was a story of war, intrigue, triumph, and tragedy. This is the rise and fall of the Romanov family. Before the Romanovs came to power, Russia was plunged into the time of troubles, 1598 to 1613, a period of famine, internal rebellion, and foreign invasions. The end of the Rurik dynasty left a power vacuum, and various noble factions, along with foreign powers like Poland, fought to control Russia. After years of chaos, a national assembly, the Zemsky Sobor, elected 16-year-old Mikhail Romanov as Tsar in 1613. Mikael was the son of the influential boyar Fyodor Romanov, who had been forced into a monastery and took the name Filaret. The Romanovs were a noble family with distant ties to the Rurik dynasty, making them an acceptable choice to end the crisis. Mikhail's reign began the Romanov dynasty, but it was far from a smooth start. Mikhail relied heavily on his father, Filaret, who became Patriarch of Moscow and wielded significant influence. Together, they stabilized Russia, rebuilt the economy, and negotiated peace with Sweden and Poland, bringing an end to foreign invasions. Under Mikhail and his successors, Russia began its slow recovery, laying the foundation for what would become one of the largest empires in history. In 1682, a new force emerged in the Romanov family, Peter I, known as Peter the Great. He co-ruled with his half-brother Ivan V at first, but after Ivan's death, Peter took full control. Standing at an imposing 6 feet 8 inches, Peter was determined to modernize Russia and bring it into the European fold. Russia, under Peter's leadership, was still far behind Europe in military technology and industry. Early defeats, like the Battle of Narva during the Great Northern War, highlighted Russia's weaknesses, but Peter was relentless. Peter personally traveled across Europe during the Great Embassy, where he learned shipbuilding, military strategy, and statecraft. Upon his return, he initiated sweeping reforms that transformed Russia's military, government, and economy. Peter's most iconic achievement was the founding of St. Petersburg in 1703. Built on swampy land by forced labor, it symbolized Russia's new modern face, an empire connected to the West. St. Petersburg would become Russia's window to Europe and its new capital. In 1709, Peter turned the tide in the Great Northern War with a decisive victory over Sweden at the Battle of Poltava. This victory secured Russia's access to the Baltic Sea and established it as a dominant power in Europe. Peter also modernized Russian society, introducing Western customs, dress codes, and industries. His reforms weren't always popular. He ruthlessly suppressed dissent, and the peasantry bore the brunt of his economic policies, which favored the nobility and merchant class. By the time of his death in 1725, Peter had transformed Russia into an empire that could rival the great powers of Europe. However, his reign left deep divides between the aristocracy and the serfs, laying the groundwork for future unrest. In 1762, another powerful figure ascended the throne, Catherine the Great. Born in Prussia as Sophie, Catherine married Peter III, a Romanov, but she soon grew disillusioned with him. After a palace coup, she seized power, becoming one of Russia's most influential rulers. Catherine's reign marked the zenith of the Romanov Empire. Under her rule, Russia expanded its borders significantly, most notably gaining Crimea, large parts of Poland, and territories in the Caucasus. Her military campaigns, often led by generals like Grigory Potemkin, increased Russia's influence in Eastern Europe and the Black Sea. Catherine embraced the Enlightenment, corresponding with intellectuals like Voltaire and Diderot. She reformed the Russian government, modernized the legal system, and encouraged education, art, and science. However, her reign was not without challenges. While the nobility enjoyed increasing privileges, the majority of Russians, especially the serfs, lived in poverty. Catherine's attempts to reform serfdom were half-hearted, and rebellions, like the massive Pugachev Rebellion in 1773 to 1775, revealed deep social divides in Russian society. The Pugachev Rebellion, led by a Cossack who claimed to be Peter III, threatened Catherine's throne. Though it was brutally crushed, the rebellion exposed the growing discontent among the lower classes, a problem that would haunt future Romanovs. By the end of her reign, Catherine had transformed Russia into a European cultural and military powerhouse. Yet the deep inequalities in Russian society would continue to grow. Fast forward to the late 19th century, and we arrive at the last Romanov ruler, Nicholas II. Crowned in 1894, Nicholas inherited an empire in turmoil. The rapid industrialization of Russia had created economic inequality, and the rigid autocracy of the Romanovs was increasingly out of touch with the needs of its people. The working class grew restless, demanding better conditions and more political representation. Nicholas's reluctance to reform his government only fueled the discontent. His ill-advised involvement in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, ended in disaster, with Russia suffering a humiliating defeat, further weakening his authority. In 1905, peaceful protesters, led by Father Gapon, marched to the Winter Palace to present a petition for reforms. What followed was Bloody Sunday, where imperial troops fired on the demonstrators, killing hundreds. This massacre shattered the people's faith in the Tsar and led to the revolution of 1905. In response to the unrest, Nicholas was forced to create the Duma, a legislative body. But his concessions were limited, and he remained an autocrat, controlling the country's policies. The cracks in the empire continued to widen. World War I proved to be the final nail in the Romanov coffin. Nicholas took personal command of the army, leaving the government in the hands of his wife, Alexandra, and the controversial mystic Rasputin. Under his leadership, Russia suffered devastating losses on the battlefield, and the war put immense strain on the already crumbling Russian economy. Rasputin's influence over Alexandra, combined with the rumors of his debauchery and corruption, further eroded the credibility of the Romanovs. Rasputin's assassination in 1916 came too late to save the dynasty. In March 1917, the February Revolution erupted in Petrograd. Protests over food shortages, war fatigue, and autocracy quickly spiraled into a full-blown uprising. With no support from the army or the people, Nicholas II was forced to abdicate the throne, bringing an end to over 300 years of Romanov rule. After his abdication, Nicholas and his family were placed under house arrest. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, took control of the government later that year in the October Revolution. By July 1918, the Romanovs were seen as too dangerous to be left alive. On the night of July 17, 1918, Nicholas, Alexandra, and their 5 children were led to a basement and executed by Bolshevik forces. The brutal killing of the entire family marked the tragic end of the Romanovs and the dawn of the Soviet era. The Romanov dynasty's legacy is a mixture of triumph and tragedy. They built an empire that dominated Eurasia, but their inability to adapt to changing times and address the needs of the people ultimately led to their downfall. Today, the Romanovs are remembered for their grandeur, but also for the deep social divides that their reign left behind. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and fall of the Romanov dynasty. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from the past.